right, welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed your conference experience so far. These 3 days have been a phenomenal opportunity to learn and grow. We wanted to close this summit with an uplifting and inspirational speaker, and Dr. Rolundus Rice, aka the Dapper Dean, will do just that in just a minute.
Before we get started, some final virtual conference etiquette reminders. Please stay muted so that we can eliminate background noise. We want to see your faces. Please turn on your camera if you have it to better engage with us. All presentations will be live, so bear with us on any technical issues. We will be monitoring the chat for questions throughout the presentations. If you enter this session and decide it's not for you, please close out. And well, I guess there aren't any different sessions, so we hope that you'd stick around. This will be recorded, so you'll be able to access this keynote session after the conference. Please don't forget to engage with us on social media using either the hashtag equity2021 or tagging us at Twitter at MoDHEWD, and of course our new conference website. And I'm going to take this opportunity to welcome our colleague Jaron Vail, who will be moderating this presentation. So I will pass the reins over to you.
Awesome, appreciate it, Sam. Yep, my name is Jaron Vail. I'm Senior Associate, Senior Research Analyst at the Missouri Department of Higher Education, Workforce Development. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our closing keynote speaker. I have introduced him really quick. Dr. Rolundus R. Rice is a thought leader, orator, professor, a university administrator. Dr. Rice has used these platforms to inspire thousands of students to earn high school diplomas, baccalaureate, and advanced degrees by sharing his firsthand experience as a troubled youth who spent his elementary years in the behavior and learning disorders programs at DeKalb County School System in metropolitan Atlanta before dropping out of high school. Dr. Rice's pilgrimage to purpose narrative arc, which has been shared from over more than 800,000 people, chronicles his life from a GED to PhD recipient. Dr. Rice is lured into university leadership at the age of 33. He was appointed Dean of Humanities and Fine Arts at Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama, and one of the youngest academic deans at an accredited four-year institution in the United States, or the Dapper Dean as he is affectionately referred to by his students. Dr. Rice's subsequent work and experiences at various institutions of higher education include Chief Diversity Officer, Assistant Provost for Academic Affairs, and Dean of the School of Graduate Studies, Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management, and Central Regional Director of Adult Education. He is recently serving as the Provost, Vice President for Academic Affairs at Russ College. As the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Dapper Dean Education Endowment Firm, Dr. Rice sees the world as a global classroom and grooming ground for greatness. Dr. Rice graduated from DeVry University with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, magna cum laude. He holds 2 advanced degrees. Rice earned a Master's of Arts in History from Alabama State University and the Doctor of Philosophy in History from Auburn University. He is the first GED recipient to earn a PhD in Auburn's 163-year history. That's pretty awesome. Dr. Rice is married to the former Dana Lee. They have 4 wonderful children, Madison, Marley, Rolundus II, and Remington. With that, welcome Dr. Rice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Give me just a second.
So the year is 1996. Unbeknownst to me, my pilgrimage to purpose began in the 9th grade while I was a student at Columbia High School in Decatur, Georgia. Before each school year, my grandmother would take me to Sears to purchase a few shirts, a pair of pants, and 1 pair of tennis shoes on what was called her charge card. You know, there are only 5 days in a week, and so I found myself having to wear some of the same clothes. My peers would be brutal in their criticisms. I can recall walking a half mile to school with grocery bags on my shoes to preserve them as long as possible. So I started skipping school to avoid my classmates' criticism after the first quarter. As a result, I fell behind in all of my classes.
I would go to the school to see about him several times, and I would take him
in the principal's office. And I would have to pal him. He would be in there. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
During the next 2 quarters of my 9th grade year, I took 11 courses. I earned F's in 10 of those classes. My lowest grade was a 1, and the teacher, Mr. Hafner, was generous in awarding me the 1. The year was 1998, and I came across this beautiful girl, Dana Lee, and I met her and her family, and they had an abiding and deep influence on my life. My childhood was characterized by a lot of relocation, but my mother did whatever she could to survive. I dropped out of high school on October 5th, 2000. My high school GPA was a 1.42 on the technical school track. I was at a low moment. I did not know that circumstances could get low.
When Rolundus told me they had dropped out of school, I couldn't believe it. I was very unhappy. I remember being very angry. I just couldn't believe it because Rolundus has always been the type of child that I knew had potential.
So the year's 2002, and it was the worst week in my life. My girlfriend dumps me on the Monday. My car is repossessed on a Thursday, and my mother kicks me out that same Friday. I didn't know it then, but that rejection was preparing me for my redirection. I earned a GED, and then I bought a 1979 Cadillac. It was a brown 2-door coupe de Vail. And I can recall my grandmother rolling pennies to put gas in this 25-gallon gas guzzler. The year is 2006. I meet Julia Player while we were students at Alabama State University. She was beautiful with hazel eyes, and after finding out that I had been admitted into the PhD program at Auburn University, I learned that she was pregnant. Our daughter, Madison, was born in January 2010. Julia died without warning 4 months later. I graduated 5 years later in 2015 with a PhD degree in the discipline of history, the second African American to earn that degree since the school was founded in 1856. The tables turned. I had the solemn obligation of supervising some of the same faculty who taught my mentors. My students at Talladega College were the first to refer to me as the Dapper Dean. I was later appointed Dean of the School of Graduate Studies at Lincoln University in Jefferson City before returning to my alma mater, Alabama State University, as an assistant vice president. After all, Alabama State University transforms GEDs into PhDs. I am Rolundus Rice, also known as the Dapper Dean, who started from a GED, who earned a PhD. Remember, when life erects a 15-foot wall before us, we must have the strength and endurance to climb a 16-foot ladder.
So I'm assuming that the burden of responsibility has shifted to me.
Yeah.
Let me thank Mrs. Salmons, Sarah Salmons, for inviting me to speak with you all today. I see a former colleague, Mrs. Zandra Kent, who always kept me in line at a former employer, so I would always acknowledge her. So hopefully I don't embarrass her because she'll tell me about it in her unique way. Let me go ahead and share my screen if that's okay, Mrs. Salmons. May I do that now?
Yes, please do. And I'm so glad that you're with us. So Dr. Rice, I'll call him Ro. He is a wonderful friend and colleague, and so we're just thrilled that you're with us today. So thank you.
I'm truly humbled, and I hope that I don't disappoint you. So I wanted to start off with the screen called By the Numbers. You all will see the number 1, the number 1.42, the number 21, the number 5, the number 32, number 89, and the number 2000. The number 1 was my lowest grade in high school. That grade was in biology. You see the 1.42, if you observe the video, that was the GPA that I had when I dropped out. The number 21, the number of F's that I earned while in high school. The number 32 was the grade I earned in driver's ed, and anybody passes driver's ed. The number five is representative of the passing grades I earned above a B. But what is ironic, everybody, is the number 89, which was my highest grade, and that just so happened to be in history. I didn't know it at the time that I would study history at the graduate level and become a professor, but that is just a lesson that God makes provisions for the vision, even when we don't sometimes see it or understand it. The number 2000 was the year that I officially dropped out on October 5th. So a little bit about me. Some of it was mentioned in the biographical video, but I've held a variety of positions, and you see them on the screen. No need to go through those in intimate detail, but I like to serve students, faculty, parents, and a lot of these experiences I've really coalesced around me being able to do what I'm doing now. And it all started when I was a work study student in financial aid. So I've been in higher ed for about 19 years, 19 of my 39 years on this earth. So have been really blessed to move around and share my love for people through education. But we're talking about access and affordability in higher education, and it's a moving target. And I do want to talk very briefly on the amount of access to information that students do or do not have, and all of this dovetails with their social network. And if students are not in certain networks, then they are not allowed to really participate in encouraging and inspiring conversations and receive information that could benefit them. This notion of the invisible knapsack, this weightless knapsack of special provisions and maps and passports that if you're not a part of a social network, then you typically do not have. My father was never in my life. My mother, an amazing mother, raised my brother and I by herself. My mother earned a high school diploma. I can remember us riding the MARTA bus. And if you know Atlanta, MARTA is the public transportation system. And she would take my brother and I to one school, then she would get back on the bus, go to work, get back off the bus, pick us up, get back on the bus, and take us home. This was our daily life. And the friendly streets of Atlanta are not always friendly. But it was my mother who ensured that we had the love around us. But love did not always mean access to different venues of information. And a lot of our students have to navigate in a world that is particularly hostile to them, especially if they are first generation or students of color. But I wanted to highlight something on the bottom, and I'll read it verbatim. There is a connection between social capital and child rearing. Middle and upper income children go through a process termed concerted cultivation, in which they are purposefully placed in environments and structured activities that increase their social capital. Um, that idea of concerted cultivation. In many households, this starts very early. And I can testify to this now as me being a professional. I'm a higher ed administrator. So my four children, Madison, Marley, Rolundus II, and Remington, by virtue of my position, they come to my job. They get to meet VIP speakers. They get to meet former presidents. They get to meet elected officials. They get to meet business tycoons by virtue of the network that I have at my job. They are able to see certain people come to our house who, if it were not for my role as a professional, they would never see. So they get to have conversations and ask questions at a very early age and have exposure and access to people who have their hands on the levers of influence and power. Um, I didn't have that as a child. And many of the students that we are serving don't have that same access. So by the time they make it to college or graduate school, they are many years behind insofar as networking is concerned. Um, and I have his social capital theory. So it gave me an idea this year, Mrs. Salmons. I created a course that I'm going to teach called Social Capital 415. And every senior who is poised to graduate, it's a 1 hour course, um, they will meet with me, the entire senior class, once a week to discuss what avenues they should travel beyond just college. And we call it beyond the bachelor's. And again, trying to expose them to people and avenues that can assist them in their journeys moving forward. Um, and I opened up with that because my childhood was primarily concerned with what's on this screen. The teacher, the principals, they told my mother that I had a behavior disorder. So they put me in a class with maybe 5 or 6 students, and we would have PE probably 4 or 5 times a day. So as you can imagine, there was not much learning in that environment. And some students had severe learning disorders. Some could not read, some could not really spell their names. And I was in this environment from the 3rd grade through the 6th grade. And what stood out to me was when they wanted to put me in another classroom, they would call it mainstreaming. In other words, the mainstream classes represented that they were normal and I was abnormal. And some of our students, particularly students of color, are diagnosed or identified as troubled students at a very early age, and it makes it very difficult for them to shake that moniker. Um, when my mother said to the principal, "Well, why is my son in this classroom?" And the principal, Dr. Charles Maxwell, he said, "Well, Mrs. Rice, this gives Rolundus a license to misbehave." And luckily, and that story gets a lot better. Dr. Maxwell attended my graduation from Auburn a few years ago and could not stop smiling because he remembered that conversation. And what they used to I guess contain and control me was put me on Ritalin. We've heard all the stories of how many students, particularly male students, are placed on Ritalin, and it made me a walking zombie. I couldn't eat, no creativity, no will. Now my behavior improved because again I had no energy to misbehave, but it took so much out of me, and this happens so much in our school system. So what we're seeing in higher education is only an offshoot of what happens in K-12, and that is not um, uh, just one state. Is not just by region. It is across the entire country that we're having to inherit what happened in the K-12 system. So, and I'm not knocking any administrators or any elected officials, but these are just realities that it would do us well to think about as we formulate policies for the 21st century. So those factors caused me to drop out, and I was working at a restaurant, washing dishes, making $7.50 an hour. And what really bothered me, some of my some of my classmates who were graduating, they walked in and they saw me washing dishes. I had a grocery bag over me so I wouldn't be soaking wet. And I thought at that moment that my life was really over. And I wasn't blaming anybody. I wasn't blaming the system or blaming the man. I had to take a hard look at myself. What is it that I did wrong? And what could I do moving forward? So this restaurant MVPs, the payroll checks used to bounce. So it was just a very difficult time for me. Um, but I always wanted to work and make money. I never wanted to have a handout. So I even started driving forklifts, and I was almost killed because I was riding what you call a cherry picker, and I backed into one of the shelves, and my face went head first into the glass screen, and I was fired maybe the next day because I didn't have on the safety harness. So despite me being willing to work, almost putting my life on the line, um, I was terminated. So me driving a forklift was preparing me for that fork in my road. You see three pictures here. There's one of a beautiful lady to the left. That was my then girlfriend, who is now my wife. But she dumps me because she learned that I was being dishonest. She did not know that I was a high school dropout. So one day she's at school at Georgia State University, and my mother spilled the beans, Mrs. Salmon. And she says, "Whoa, you mean to tell me that Ro is not enrolled in college?" So she washed her hands of me. And that put me at an intersection of peril and purpose. I could have made a decision to go left or a decision to go right. The following day, my car was repossessed. It was a 1990 white Acura. It had the speakers in the back so you could hear me coming down the street. So I tell you all, I was not always this refined professional with books in the background. We all grow and evolve. But the lesson is, we must be very careful about labeling students based on what they can do or what they cannot do, because I was labeled in every environment I was in as a problem child, someone who was lazy, all the traditional stereotypes that were really not accurate. But here again, it drove me. It drove me to prove everybody wrong. And I'll tell you, all that I have accomplished, it was not because I aspired to be a scholar or enjoy the life of the mind. I was simply trying to impress my girlfriend for her to take me back. And as a result, I've been able to touch so many different students, but it was all from a desire to impress my girlfriend. And this was a picture from 20 years ago. She's now a mother with who has 4 children, but she's still pretty hot if you ask me. And I'll talk about her a little bit later. Um, so when I was in school trying to get my life together, my grandmother, she's 84 years old. And one day I said, I have to do something differently. So she loaned me $1.75 to catch the MARTA bus, and I started studying for my GED. And what I realized was that I wasn't as dumb as I thought. So I went to a few classes, and within a month or two, I was sitting for my exam. So when I got the call that I passed the GED requirements, to this day, that is the highlight of my professional life. It wasn't earning an undergraduate degree, it wasn't earning the master's degree, and it was not earning the PhD degree, because by that time I knew what I could do. It was the GED that was the springboard that allowed me to jump off into the pool of prosperity to provide a life for my wife and my kids, because it showed me that I could do much better than what I had done previously. And you don't believe me, this is an example of the transcripts. I did not know how I scored until a year and a half ago when I was working for the community college system of Alabama. And if you all would notice, once again, my best scores were in social studies. And if you think about when I was in high school, my highest grade was in social studies. And at this time, again, I had no idea that I would study history at the graduate level, nonetheless impart knowledge to students in that same discipline many years later. So we have to watch the trends and watch what our students are good and performing, because my professors or even my elementary school teachers once said, Rolundus, you love to read, you love to analyze. Why can't you get your life together? And that was a heavy question for an adolescent as myself. But again, this is just a barometer or a lesson for all of us to, a student may not be good in mathematics. They may not be good in science. They may not be good in English. And Mrs. Salmons, her husband, is a brilliant literary, so I'm not knocking the English discipline at all. But this just shows that when we monitor our students, we see how they can perform, and we're supposed to model them. It was Augustus Caesar who said it this way. He said, when I found Rome brick, I made it marble. Now, he was the first emperor of the Roman Empire. What we are doing, Missouri, is we are finding students brick, and we are making them marble. And that is a very difficult thing to do, but we have to always watch for the clues and how we can help to tailor students. Now, I'm a transparent person and don't mind sharing this. So I shared with you all that my wife dumped me. So she was living her life, so I moved to Alabama, and I met a phenomenal individual named Julia Player. This is my oldest daughter's biological mother. She passed without warning and had never been sick in 2010. The picture to the top right is the last picture I took of her right when I was admitting her into the hospital. So at the time, Madison was only 3.5, 4 months old. And everybody said, Ro, you must send Madison to Atlanta because you're just the father. And at the time, I didn't know how to change a diaper. I did not know how to make a bottle. And for you mothers on the call, the difficulty that you experience when trying to wean your child from you to a bottle is a very challenging process. So imagine for me trying to wean my daughter when her mother was no longer there. While trying to finish a graduate program, I was teaching 4 courses at Tuskegee. I was also working 40 hours a week at Alabama State. And all of my family was in Atlanta. But I'll never forget a conversation I had with Madison's godmother when I was thinking about sending Madison home. He said, well, Ro, you are tapping out too fast. And that stuck with me that oftentimes we tap out too fast before we can see the full promise of what we can do to help others. So that was an awakening moment for me. What that taught me, everybody, was metal. And you see the screen here of a traditional metal detector. And I have the definition to the left of the screen so I don't have to recite it. But this was my metal moment. I had to understand what I was made of. And as educators, we have to also see what are our students made of and bring the most and best out of them. Because we all have metal, maybe not as much as we should, but we should be those metal detectors to detect the possibilities within our students and bring the best out of them. This screen is interesting. Most of us know of CPR as pulmonary resuscitation. Um, in this context, I'm going to call it calling and purpose revival, CPR, right? So when one is performing CPR, and I may have some medical professionals on the call, CPR can prevent sudden death in patients due to cardiac arrest. And to save that individual, you have to perform very violent chest compressions to keep the oxygen going, keep the blood going. And in the process, you may have your ribs broken, your sternum could be fractured. And keep in mind, the ribs is what protect the heart. Now, the patient may have broken ribs, but the patient lives. And to accomplish our purpose, the lesson is sometimes our spirit and our will may have to be broken in order to restart the beating heart of one's purpose. Now, I'm mentioning this slide because oftentimes our students feel as if they don't know their purpose or they thought they knew it and things did not work out. So sometimes we have to break the spirit a little bit, but we have to break it enough, but also lift them back up. And that is how students can find their way in an environment that is sometimes hostile, where they haven't had access, they haven't had the funds to, or affordability rather. So again, CPR. This screen, you all are wondering, why is Ro having a picture of the boy King Arthur and an eye exam with our students? If you all know the story of King Arthur, they solicited people from all over the land, the strongest, the wisest, the richest, the most popular, to try to pull this sword out of a stone. And the logic was, the myth was, whoever pulled the stone would be the rightful king. But instead, this little boy, who was frail, not popular, didn't have the access or affordability, he was somehow able to pull this sword from the stone. The lesson in that is for students, everybody cannot swing their sword. We have to put our hands on them despite their deficiencies, despite their socioeconomic backgrounds, because everybody has a sword to swing. To the right, you see an eye exam. This is a true story. When I was living in Jefferson City, we lived not far from Lincoln University. And one morning, my daughter Madison was trying to walk around with my eyeglasses. I was getting ready for work. And she said, "Daddy, I have on your glasses, but I can't see anything." And I had to remind Madison that the eyeglass prescription was for me. So, in other words, we must remind our students that everybody cannot see what they see. And in that context, they will be disappointed. They're going to have setbacks, but we must always remind them that their vision is their vision. And oftentimes, friends, family, and those closest to us cannot see that. So, this is all about giving to students those tools that's in that invisible knapsack that provides them access and affordability. I wanted to share this with you all. This is not my screen. This slide rather. But these are some of the issues that our students are dealing with, particularly first generation students. And you see from inadequate medical care to family and friends, health and safety, not having enough food. Now, we have to think about this. A disaster for someone else, if we are professionals, we have no context for what some students are going through. There are some students who cannot afford to eat. There are some students who cannot afford to pay other bills. For example, Georgia State has a program that's set aside funds for emergencies to ensure that those first gen students, if they suffer from a financial setback, it doesn't hold them back. Let's think about it. If a student has a car and that student has a flat tire, a flat tire may cost maybe $100 to correct, depending on where you are, what car it is. That student can't travel back and forth to class. And we think about it, that student for $100 will, if they're taking a math course or a particularly gateway course and they can't make it to class because of a flat tire, that could be disastrous. And let's see how this goes into effect. If a student fails a class or fails multiple classes, then that impacts their financial aid. The financial aid impacts how they're able to sometimes pay their bills because of refund checks. It is a cyclical situation that we must always be mindful of the students based on their backgrounds and how we can help address by, again, providing access and thinking of ideas to ensure that the educational apparatus is open to them in all ways and all forms. I want you all to think about this book. And the focus of this book is how relationships are critical in higher education. And I'll talk about this first bullet. A quality of interaction has so much meaningful impact for a student. It is one thing for a student to pass me in the hallway and say, "Doc, how are you doing today?" Versus me having a chance to play ping pong with them in the student center, or me choosing to play pool with them, or me sitting down learning about their families. In their minds, they're having the opportunity to sit down with the VP of Academic Affairs, and it shows them that I care. That is something that many of our students don't feel as if that they have. You all are wondering why I'm showing a picture of Michael Luther King Jr. And he never changed his name officially to Martin. But this is from 1948, him graduating from Morehouse. But we often think about King as a shining luminary who had always potential for greatness. That is not the case. Martin Luther King Jr. was a C student at Morehouse College. Martin Luther King Jr. only earned 1A. Martin Luther King Jr. earned a C in public speaking. Imagine Martin Luther King Jr. earning a C in public speaking. So when you think about this letter from Benjamin Mays, King was applying for graduate school. And he says that King is not a brilliant student, but he had a good mind. He said that with good competition, he could do better. Now, this is from a college president speaking about one of his students. So if Morehouse College transformed a student who was reading on an 8th grade level when he entered Morehouse College, imagine what all of our schools can do if we wrap our arms and invest in students who have the potential. Because what if someone did not invest in Martin Luther King Jr. because he read on an 8th grade level? What if Morehouse did not invest in King because he only earned 1A? How many times have we met students who were lackluster on paper but had all the potential in the world? It is up to us to tap into that and leverage that to prepare our students for greatness. But this is a reality. First gen students of color often lack those networks, such as the family or peers, that can help them navigate the rigors of college and graduate school. And the second bullet is even more important. Parents who attended school tend to speak with authority and knowledge about the processes. So when Madison and Marley and Rolundus II go to school, I would have amassed a body of knowledge to where I could say, no, Madison and Marley, one should do X, Y, and Z, because they will value my experiences. But when students don't have that, because that information burden shifts from the adults as caregivers to students as the collectors, those first gen students are not uniquely equipped to navigate those types of conversations. And so oftentimes students, first gen students, encounter barriers in this regard that other students just don't have. And this is not knocking people who don't have to deal with these things, just asking for others to understand that the barriers are different. And life isn't always good just because somebody's skin color or the texture of their hair. All of us have to deal with life, and it's difficult from all sides. But we have to understand that just because I don't walk that student's life or live in his shoes, then that their issues don't matter. And when we know that they matter, we are better prepared to address them. We're getting towards the end. When the student makes it to us, it is helpful for us to know which obstacles they've had to surmount just to get the courage or the application fee to apply to school. Not even thinking about books, not even thinking about all of the factors that impact the cost of attendance. Many of our students are underprepared for not just college, but graduate work. And I feel this even sometimes now. Sometimes I still feel like I don't deserve or I'm not smart enough. Now, I'm someone, by looking at me on paper, I probably deserve where I am or where I could possibly go. But I'm always questioning, am I smart enough? Am I good enough? So if I'm feeling that way at 39 and somewhat accomplished, imagine what an 18-year-old feels who had no parents, who have navigated the rigors of high school or college graduation or graduate school. They are in a world to where they feel that they just cannot thrive in. So as good mentors, and I've had to learn this myself, I can't seek to create other Rolundus Rices. That's what I want to do. All advisors want to have disciples who study in their past and write books and all this, but sometimes that's not the exact path of our students. So when we understand this, we are much better prepared to give the students all of the options, because the options lead to access. Access can lead to affordability. So these are things that we must know as we think about policies and practices moving forward. Now, Ms. Salmons, I had to take a shameless opportunity to talk about the book that's coming out. And the reason primarily why I'm sharing this is not because of who wrote the blurb or who is publishing the book. All of this is the culmination of people in higher education caring about Rolundus Rice. They saw potential. When I took my first class as a graduate student in history, the professor, Dorothy Archer, she said, Rolundus, You call yourself a graduate student? Come to my office. We need to talk. Now, mind you, I did not have any background in history. I knew about King, I knew about Lincoln, I knew about Washington, the basics that everybody knows about. But Alabama State wrapped their arms around me. And at the time, I didn't know what active voice was. I didn't know what passive voice was. I did not know what subject verb agreement was. I didn't know what critical scholarly objectivity was. I didn't know what historiography was. But it was in that school where somebody saw the potential in me. And that has culminated in my first publication with the University of South Carolina Press. And again, many of our students have the same potential if we can provide them the access and we can give to them those tools that have been traditionally denied them based on one's socioeconomic status or their zip code. So I just commend the state of Missouri. I commend Mrs. Salmons and all of those who have put this initiative together because it is sorely needed if we are to create programs and policies that benefit students in the state of Missouri. So that is all that I have, but I'm more than happy to answer some questions. So I will, Ms. Salmons, I'm assuming I need to switch the sharing or can you do that? Help me understand.
You can just stop sharing and then we'll go to Q&A. That's fine. You see stop share.
Okay. Let's see.
Perfect. All right.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Rice. Really appreciate your time. We do actually have a few questions in the chat. We'll get to, if that's okay, Sarah's up. Am I? Okay, cool. All right, let's see. Okay. How do you help students get past the imposter syndrome? From communication standpoint, is there certain messaging that you have noticed that helps?
You know what? And that's a very good question because even now, I still feel as if I'm dealing with the imposter syndrome. And what I do, I love to take off my necktie, take off my jacket, and sometimes I just walk with students. And I'm in the library now, right? And this is my favorite place on campus. Most of my greatest conversations with students, as it relates to knowing how to communicate verbally or in writing, happens in the library. Because, and I took this concept from Lincoln University. I moved the writing center to the library because I saw the connection between literacy and reading. So I always impress upon students the more they read, the better prepared they are. It expands one's vocabulary because the object is to never be in a room where someone can talk over your head. And the more you read, students are able to minimize that what is an impassable gulf in a liminal space where there's an authority figure and a non-authority figure. So it all goes back to me to reading and making students comfortable because when they see us, they see scholars and those who engage in the life of the mind, and they forget that we were born with what John Locke called the tabula rasa, a blank slate. So all of us, regardless of where we're from, somebody somewhere taught us something. And so for me, just showing students that when you see my GED certificate on the wall and not the PhD, that opens up a line of communication that says, okay, if he did this, if he learned this, then I can do the same thing. So our students cannot be what they cannot see. So when they see us, then they feel that they too can do what we've done or even accomplish even more. So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Do you have any financial tips for students that can help them move forward with their education and not be so stressed out about finances?
You know, I had to learn this lesson later in life, and it goes back to GPA. GPA is like credit. The moment it begins to decline, the harder it is to raise it. And for financial wellness, it is so important. Number one, I would always think about creating multiple streams of income because you do not want one's income to be singular because there are so many factors in the volatile market that it will cause you to make some life-changing decisions. Now, I've always, well, not always, this was very recent. Students, including adults, budgeting is certainly important. But one of my mentors told me the concept of deferred gratification. I didn't know what it meant until I had to make some decisions. In other words, investing on the front end will ensure that you have what you need on the back end. So you may not be able to live in the richest places while you are in school. You may not be able to live in the best neighborhoods while you are in school. This is a period for students to be refined, and I know I may get some knocks for this, but we have to forego the luxury until we've been there and we've done enough to earn it. I see so often students wearing shoes that cost $300. Now I don't knock what you wear. That's for students to do what they want to do. But I always encourage students to invest in things that can make them money. I would much rather spend $200 on a blue blazer that can help me on a job interview versus me going out paying $300 for tennis shoes that cannot do anything for me. So it's just sitting down, making fiscally responsible decisions that will have a bearing on one's day-to-day finances, and budgeting on a monthly basis is also so important too. So I don't know if that helps, but that's just a cold hard reality that I had to face as a young graduate student and even as an undergraduate.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you. What is the most effective way to reach out to students and encourage them to reach their full potential?
You know, that is a delicate question because, in many respects, as academicians and professors, we have to have this air and aura of intellectualism, and oftentimes students they just hear this. So it is good for us, and you all have heard it before, meeting these students where they are. If they listen to Jay-Z or Tupac or whomever, have the music playing when they come into your office, or whomever you listen to, because in a university environment, and you all know as current faculty or former faculty, current staff, former staff, a university is a very intimidating environment. So it's all about making students as comfortable as possible with who they are, while at the same time pushing them to be better. I often tell my students that you never want to be the smartest man or woman in the room, because when you are, you can't learn anything from anybody else. Um, but they have to be able to trust me. So before we can impart into them, they have to be able to trust us. And to create a culture of trust, they must be able to relate and understand. There are some things that I can say to a student that someone 30 years older may not be able to say, because I can connect with them on the level based on where they are. So it's all about connecting with them and having those quality of interactions where they can begin to trust and appreciate what we have to say to them as faculty and staff.
Awesome. Working with students who are working on their high set GED, what have you found to help them understand they have potential to achieve their dreams, but dreams and goals that they through higher education certificates or gainful employment?
Read the question to me one more time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I
Okay.
apologize. My chat was messing up. Working with students who are working on their high set, or in quotations, GED. Have you found ways to help them understand that they have potential to achieve their dreams and goals towards gaining an education certification or gainful employment?
All right. So I think for me, and everybody may pursue this differently. Um, the biggest and most important prop in my office is the GED certificate, because it starts so many questions. And the question is how, who, how much, how could you, how did you, who helped you? Those types of questions create feedback that students can do whatever they desire to do if we, again, put our arms around them. Right now at Russ College, I'm building a study abroad program. And when students can see something outside of their own zip codes, see how people live in other countries, it gives them a window into the lives of others. And it makes them have a sense of enlightenment and empowerment. So for me, it goes back to access and exposure. Many of our students do not feel or believe what is possible because they've never seen it. When I met my girlfriend, and this is who's now my wife, I had never seen, and I'll be very honest with you, black folks who live like my wife's folks. They all had nice cars. They lived in nice neighborhoods. They took 4 or 5 vacations a year. Her parents and all of her aunts and uncles had at least undergrad and graduate degrees. I didn't know that people live like that. So when I saw it, I said, maybe I too can do the same thing. Again, it goes back to us knowing that our students cannot be what they've never seen. That's like me going to a country in Europe or a country in Africa trying to give someone directions and I've never been. We have had to live and experience certain things to ensure that our students can see and feel what we felt to give them guidance and direction. So it's all about being an example, but also holding ourselves accountable to ensure that we are giving them what they need. Because in college, we teach more than just lessons about the schoolwork, or we also teach life. And I think we must always remember that in our interactions with students.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have one last question, if that's okay.
Sure.
What is the most effective way to foster a sense of belonging on campus within different social identities, or between social identities? Sorry.
Again, a very good question. Right now, we're grappling with a similar challenge. I'm in North Mississippi, and there's not a very robust environment on campus that is inviting for people who are not of African descent. And we're trying to recruit students from South America. We're trying to, have students to commit to us from other cultures. And we found that despite our best efforts to offer quality academic programming, if those students don't feel as if they belong, it's going to show in their classwork, and it's going to affect retention, progression, and graduation. So number one, I think we must have the resources available to fund um, certain groups on campus, certain clubs. It's all about inclusivity or inclusion. When students who are from other countries or who cannot relate with the experience that is already happening on campus, it is incumbent upon us to create avenues and groups to ensure that they feel comfortable. And it has to be more than just Latin America week. That's we have to be more detailed about doing things all year round to ensure that students feel comfortable. And that's done with more than just having a day for meals. We must have things that students know that it is not surface level attention. Things have to be written in policy and procedures, whether that's allotting a certain amount of scholarship money for other students. And again, belonging, and I think I mentioned it on one of the slides, it's a huge impact. It's a huge factor, rather, for us to ensure that they feel comfortable. Because if a student is not comfortable, it's like wearing a shoe that's too small or too big. They'll wear for a few steps and then they take the shoe off. Same thing here. They'll be here a few semesters, and because they're not comfortable, because something just doesn't fit, then we lose them. So it's about, again, creating sophisticated avenues to ensure that students have access to individuals on campus and without, so they feel that they belong. So I hope I answered your question in a roundabout way. Happy to expound further if you need me to.
So really appreciate your time, Dr. Rice. This was great information, great presentation. It looks like that's all the questions we have in the chat. So I'll turn it over to Sam and Sarah, if that's all right. Appreciate your time, sir.
Thank
Yeah.
you for having me, sir.
Thank you so much. And I love that analogy that you just said about the shoe that doesn't fit. I'm going to use that. If you don't mind, I'm going to steal that. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Rice, and thanks to all our presenters and to our audience for such great questions and interaction throughout the summit. Thank you to everybody who's made this summit possible. There's far too many people to thank, but mostly to our participants for supporting our work in this space. This event every year is about you and for you, the people, and also for the students, making sure that we do the work every day to improve higher education for all students. You are our why.
Please watch for a survey coming from us in the next couple of days. We're very interested to hear all of your guys' feedback about how we can improve both events like this and others that the department is hosting, how we can make this a smoother process for all parties involved. Please continue to visit the Edge Events website often for updates. We'll be posting the recordings as soon as we have them all rendered and ready to go, as well as other materials from the summit. Again, thank you again so much to everybody for making today and this week possible, and we look forward to continuing to work together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wright.